Your path to US citizenship may be shorter than you think. That's what we're talking about on today's episode of Sumner School Family Immigration Basics. My name is Emily Sumner with Sumner Immigration Law. Let's talk about how long it might take for you to become a US citizen. Generally speaking, a person who is not born a US citizen or has derived US citizenship from their parents has to go through a process called naturalization. In order to apply for naturalization, generally speaking, a person has to be a green card holder, also known as a legal permanent resident, for at least 5 years before they can apply for naturalization. In general, in addition, you can apply for naturalization 90 days before, submit that application 90 days before you meet that 5-year waiting requirement. However, there is an awesome exception for spouses of US citizens. So if you obtained your green card through a marriage to a US citizen, or if you obtained your green card in a different way, it doesn't matter, as long as you meet these requirements that I'm about to say, you can apply for naturalization faster after only having your green card for 3 years. So the requirements are that you have had your green card for at least 3 years. That time frame can include conditional residence if you received conditional residence originally. You have to be married to and living with a US citizen for at least 3 years. So your spouse has to have been a US citizen for 3 years, and you have to have been married and living with your US citizen spouse for a period of at least 3 years. Again, this is something that applies very commonly, of course, to people who obtain their green card through marriage to a US citizen, but it's not limited to that. I have worked with clients over the years who have had employment-based green cards. They received their green card through an employment-based process, and now they're married to a US citizen and they are qualified this way and they're able to apply sooner for naturalization, which is great. So again, like the 5-year period, you can apply if you are eligible for naturalization after 3 years because you're married to and living with a US citizen. You can apply up to 90 days before you meet that 3-year requirement. In addition, we have a separate video on the I-751 and the N-400 interplay. So the I-751 is the form that you use to remove the conditions if you have conditional residence. That means if you've been married to your spouse for less than 2 years, as of the time you receive your green card, you will receive conditional residence, meaning the green card is valid for 2 years. You have to file the I-751 petition to remove those conditions. It absolutely is possible to file the N-400 application for naturalization, even if you have the I-751 petition still pending, which is great because the I-751 petition in general can take years to be processed, and filing the N-400, the application for naturalization, will actually speed that up. Like I said, we have a separate video on that we will hopefully link in the comments here for you to review as well, if you're interested in that. If you are filing the N-400, filing for naturalization based on being married to a US citizen and living with a US citizen for at least 3 years, we always include evidence of that relationship. You want to include documentation that you have a true relationship and that you have been married and living with that person for at least 3 years. Otherwise, USCIS obviously could question it and send a request for evidence or potentially deny. In addition, you do have to, of course, make sure, regardless of whether you're applying based on the 5-year period or the 3-year period, you have to make sure that you are otherwise eligible for naturalization. So that includes things like looking at physical presence. Have you been in the US for at least half of the eligibility period? Do you have continuous residence for at least continuous residence for that 3 or 5-year period, whichever one is applicable? And do you have good moral character, which is defined specifically in immigration law? So if you haven't paid taxes, if you have criminal issues, potentially multiple traffic tickets, including ones that maybe are reckless, you want to make sure to have a conversation with an immigration lawyer before you proceed, even if those charges have been expunged or dismissed. So this is great news, right? And like I said, you can apply based on having been a resident for at least 3 years if you're married to and living with a US citizen, even if you obtained your green card through a different way. Like, for example, if you received your green card through the employment-based process, or maybe your parents sponsored you for permanent residence and now you're married to a US citizen, you can still apply, which is awesome. So a couple of questions that we get regularly from people. One is, I obtained my green card, for example, through my parent. Can I now apply for naturalization after only 3 years? The answer is yes, if again, you're married to a US citizen and have been living with them for at least 3 years. Otherwise, this does not apply to other family relationships, this 3-year rule. It does not apply if you're married to a permanent resident. It does not apply if you received your green card through your parent or your child, whatever the situation is. It's only if you are married to and living with a US citizen for at least 3 years. In addition, another frequently asked question is, I'm separated, but I'm not divorced from my US citizen spouse. Can I still apply? The answer is, it depends. Generally speaking, no, because of that requirement that you be living with your US citizen spouse. So if you are in that situation, absolutely have a consultation with a qualified immigration attorney before you proceed so that you can come up with a clear plan that is likely, hopefully, to be successful. I hope that you have found this information helpful. If so, I hope that you will share this video with a friend or colleague. Make sure to put your questions in the comments below. We will answer if we can. None of this is legal advice, and we can't give legal advice in the comments. So if you are interested in beginning a case, if you have questions, legal questions, you can set a time for a consultation to speak directly with me or another immigration attorney in our office. We will have contact information on the following slide. In addition, I hope that you will subscribe to this channel. Make sure that you turn on those notifications so you don't miss our next video. We have lots of information coming out and, of course, lots of changes regularly. My name is Emily Sumner with Sumner Immigration Law. Until next time.